Imagine for a second, right, that you possess absolute power.
Eh.
Like you literally have the entire world at your fingertips. Limitless resources, ultimate authority, all of it.
Sure.
And then I want you to imagine just throwing every single bit of it away. I mean, destroying your own family, losing your mind, and completely ruining your life. And all of this for a single uncontrollable obsession.
It almost sounds like, I don't know, a heavy-handed tragedy or a myth,
Yeah.
but it's actually a very real, very documented human pattern.
Right, and that is exactly why we're here. Welcome to today's deep dive. We've gathered, honestly, a fascinating stack of sources for this one.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking everything from ancient historical accounts of the Roman Empire straight through to modern landmark neuroimaging studies.
Yeah, and some truly groundbreaking behavioral psychology research, too, because our mission today is to explore a force that, we usually treat as just a bad habit or maybe a moral failing.
Right. But we are going to look at how unchecked lust doesn't just cloud your judgment.
Hmm.
It literally rewires the physical structure of your brain.
Exactly. We're traveling from the horrifying history of ancient Rome straight into modern neuroscience. And we won't leave you hanging.
No, definitely not.
We are culminating this deep dive with a concrete, science-backed roadmap to actually defeat these urges.
Because the research here fundamentally changes how you view the problem. When you look at the clinical data, you realize you aren't fighting like a vague concept of temptation. You're fighting a biological mechanism.
Yeah, reading through these sources, the best analogy I could come up with for unchecked lust is a computer virus.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Right, it gets into your system and it slowly overwrites your operating system. Day by day, line by line of code, until suddenly you just no longer control your own actions. The virus is running the machine.
And to truly understand the destructive scale of this virus, we have to look at the ultimate historical case study. We need to examine a human being who had every conceivable reason to stay rational.
Is someone who had the best support system in the world?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But entirely lost the ability to govern their base desires. We need to talk about the Emperor Nero.
Nero's story is the absolute definition of a nightmare scenario. And what makes it so striking is, well, how well he actually started out.
Yeah, people forget that.
Right. In 54 AD, Nero becomes the emperor of Rome at only 16 years old. Historically, handing absolute power to a teenager is a recipe for instant disaster.
Usually, yes.
But for the first 5 years of his rule, Nero was surprisingly stable.
Because he had anchors holding him in place.
Mhm.
On one side, he had Seneca, the famous Stoic philosopher, acting as his mentor to keep his intellect sharp and, his governance fair.
Like the philosopher.
And on the other side, he had Burrus, who was a highly disciplined military commander, keeping his use of force in check. So between the philosopher and the soldier, Nero's mind and his muscle were completely under control.
The Roman people actually thought they were entering a golden age.
They really did. But
Right.
then the catalyst enters the picture, a woman named Poppaea Sabina.
And according to the historical accounts we have, she wasn't just beautiful. She was brilliant, highly ambitious, and she knew exactly how to play the brutal Roman political game.
She ignited a pathological obsession in Nero. It wasn't just attraction. I mean, she became his singular mission in life.
But there were massive obstacles, right? Both of them were already married.
Yeah. Nero's wife, Octavia, was one problem. But the ultimate wall between Nero and Poppaea was Nero's own mother, Agrippina.
Who was basically the ultimate power behind the throne. I mean, she had engineered his rise to emperor in the first place.
Exactly. She controlled him, and Poppaea recognized this dynamic immediately. So Poppaea manipulated Nero with surgical precision.
How so?
Well, she would mock him. She would whisper to him that he might be the emperor of Rome, but he wasn't a free man. She told him he ruled an empire, but he was still just a boy on his mother's leash.
Oh, wow. Hitting the ego of a young, powerful man. That is devastatingly effective.
Extremely. And by 59 AD, Nero's obsession reaches a boiling point. He decides his own mother has to die so he can be with Poppaea.
And the lengths he goes to are just absurd. He commissions a special boat uniquely designed to secretly fall apart in deep water.
Like a cartoon villain plot.
Literally. The plan is for Agrippina to drown in a tragic, unavoidable accident.
But the flaw in his plan was that Agrippina was an elite swimmer.
Wait, really?
Yeah, the boat collapses exactly as planned, but she survives the wreckage and literally just swims back to the shore.
That is wild. And when Nero finds out she survived, he doesn't pause. He doesn't experience a moment of clarity or rethink the sheer insanity of assassinating his mother.
And I don't know.
He just drops the secrecy, sends soldiers directly to her villa, and has her brutally executed.
And with his mother out of the way, he turns to his wife, 20-year-old Octavia. He divorces her, exiles her, manufactures false accusations against her, and eventually has her murdered.
It's so dark.
The historical accounts suggest he actually had Octavia's severed head brought back to Rome just to display it to Poppaea.
It is so chilling. And the tragic irony of all this violence is that by 62 AD, Nero has it all. He has the throne, absolute power, and the woman he slaughtered his family for.
Yeah, he got what he wanted.
But just 3 years later, in 65 AD, Poppaea dies from complications during childbirth.
And that loss pushes Nero into total irrevocable madness. He is so consumed by his obsession with her that he searches all of Rome for a look-alike.
Like a literal replacement.
Right. And when he can't find a woman who fits the bill, he finds a young boy named Sporus who bears a resemblance.
Oh, no.
Nero has the boy castrated, dresses him in Poppaea's clothes, and literally lives with him as his dead wife.
Until 68 AD, when the Senate finally declares him a public enemy, his army abandons him and he takes his own life. Total ruin.
Total ruin.
But if you're sitting there wondering how this happens, I have to jump in here and challenge the timeline a bit.
Go for it.
We are talking about a guy who started with an ideal setup. If Nero was a modern CEO, he had a flawless board of directors with Seneca and Burrus. How does someone with such deeply rational advisors snap so completely and so violently over a single person?
That's the million-dollar question. And the answer is that Nero's collapse wasn't just a psychological weakness or a failure of his advisors. It was a literal physical hijacking of his brain's hardware.
The virus.
Exactly. And that connects directly to the stack of modern neuroscience research we have on obsession and lust today.
Right. Here is where the deep dive gets incredibly fascinating. We aren't just looking at ancient history anymore. We are looking at modern brain scans.
Let's examine a landmark study from 2014. Researchers took functional MRI scans of 64 healthy adult men and correlated those scans with their pornography consumption habits.
And the findings were alarming.
Very. They found two massive physical changes in the brains of the heavy consumers.
And I want to emphasize that physical changes, not just shifts in mood or, temporary dopamine levels, but the actual tangible structure of the brain.
Right. So first, they found a significant reduction in gray matter in a region called the right caudate.
Let's break that down, because the right caudate is a deeply important piece of anatomy.
It is. The caudate nucleus plays a vital role in how the brain processes reward and forms habits. When you flood the brain with massive, unnatural spikes of dopamine, which unchecked lust and pornography do, the brain tries to protect itself from the overload.
It gets overwhelmed.
Exactly. So it literally downregulates its dopamine receptors. It shrinks the gray matter in the right caudate so it doesn't get flooded.
Wow.
But the consequence of that shrinkage is that the person becomes desensitized. Normal, everyday joys no longer register. They require more and more extreme stimuli just to feel a baseline level of pleasure.
Which perfectly explains Nero's escalation.
Yeah.
A normal relationship wasn't enough. It had to be a forbidden affair. Then the affair wasn't enough. It had to be murder. The desensitization drives the madness.
Precisely. But the second finding from that 2014 study is even more critical for understanding how we lose control.
What did they find?
The researchers found a severe weakening of the neural connections between the brain's reward system and the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex.
Okay, and for the listeners, the prefrontal cortex is basically the chief executive of your brain. It controls long-term planning, logical reasoning, and most importantly, impulse control.
Right, the CEO.
Yeah.
When that connection weakens, the primitive reward-seeking part of your brain is no longer communicating with the logical, consequence-weighing part of your brain.
It's just flying blind.
Yeah. Indulging in this isn't just feeding a bad habit. You are systematically dismantling your capacity for clear thinking. You are taking the part of your mind that says, maybe don't text your ex at 2 a.m. or maybe don't sabotage your career for a momentary thrill, and you are unplugging it.
Unplugging the CEO.
Yeah.
And the toll isn't just cognitive, right? It breaks the body as well. The data we reviewed includes an international survey showing that over 21% of heavy users experience erectile dysfunction.
Yes.
You are looking at a behavior that damages the brain's hardware and the body's physical responses simultaneously.
The natural question then becomes, well, if the chief executive of your brain is physically shrinking and losing its connection to your reward center, how do you fight back?
Right. Can you just wake up and use brute force willpower? Can you just tell yourself, I'm not going to think about this anymore?
See, relying on brute willpower means relying on that compromised prefrontal cortex we just talked about.
Yeah.
It fundamentally backfires.
But why is the instinct to just suppress the thought fail so spectacularly?
To understand the failure of suppression, we have to look to the work of psychologist Daniel Wegner. He ran a devastatingly simple experiment.
Oh, I love this one.
He brought participants in and gave them one single instruction. Whatever you do not think about a white bear.
And the result is instant obsession with white bears.
Exactly. It's a phenomenon Wegner called ironic process theory. He showed that when you try to suppress a thought, your brain actually runs two separate systems at the same time.
Okay, two systems.
System 1 is the conscious effort trying to suppress the thought. But System 2 is a mental monitor operating in the background, constantly checking to see if the forbidden thought has returned.
So it's like hiring a bouncer for your own brain and telling him, whatever you do, don't let the white bear in. The bouncer now has to spend all night scanning the crowd, looking specifically for the white bear,
That's a great analogy.
which guarantees the bear is the only thing the bouncer's actually thinking about.
Exactly. The monitor keeps the thought alive, active, and right at the front of your mind. The harder you fight it, the stronger it becomes. And we actually have historical proof that you cannot brute force your way out of this paradox.
Where do we see that?
Look at some early Christians in history. They were so desperate to escape sexual desire that they resorted to physical castration. They thought if they removed the physical components of the body, the urge would vanish entirely.
Whoa, wait. They thought they could literally cut the virus out of the hardware.
Yes, but it failed entirely because the desire didn't live in the body, it lived in the mind. The obsessive thoughts persisted, the urges persisted, and the practice was so damaging and ineffective that church officials actually had to step in and strictly prohibit it.
You cannot mutilate or suppress your way out of this. It reminds me of trying to ignore a scratch on a brand new phone screen. The more you tell yourself, don't look at the scratch, the more your brain spotlights it until it's literally all you can see.
Right, so brute force willpower strengthens the urge, and the logical center of your brain is compromised anyway.
So how on earth do you win?
You win by outsmarting your biology. You use a method that works with the brain's natural wiring, rather than fighting against it.
Working with it, not against it.
Right. Modern psychology gives us a very concrete blueprint to do exactly that, starting with how you handle the immediate onset of the urge.
Let's walk through the sequence. The first move is to stop suppressing and start observing.
Yes, step 1.
When an intrusive thought or a sexual urge hits you, do not say don't think about it. Instead, say to yourself internally, I am experiencing an urge right now. You just label it.
Notice it from a distance. The neurology behind this simple act is actually profound. When you experience a sudden urge, your amygdala, the brain's panic and emotion center, is firing rapidly.
It's panicking.
Yeah, it treats the desire for dopamine like an urgent survival need. But the moment you consciously label the emotion, you force blood flow away from the amygdala and back into the prefrontal cortex.
So you are literally starving the urge of its biological energy. By shifting from the victim of the urge to the clinical observer of it, you strip the thought of its emotional charge.
Exactly.
But, even if you label the urge, the feeling doesn't vanish instantly. The biological wave is still moving through you.
Which is why the next biological strategy, step 2, is a technique called urge surfing. You treat the urge exactly like a wave in the ocean.
Okay, urge surfing.
It has a starting point, it builds up to a peak, and then, if you don't act on it, it naturally crashes and fades on its own.
When you are in the middle of it, though, it feels like it's going to last forever. The panic sets in that you will feel this intense craving for the rest of the day unless you give in.
It feels permanent, but biologically it isn't. Dopamine spikes are incredibly expensive for the brain to maintain. Your brain simply does not have the energy to sustain that level of intense craving indefinitely.
That makes sense.
Researchers Bowen and Marlett tested this exact active mindfulness technique on smokers experiencing intense nicotine cravings.
And the underlying biological mechanism for a nicotine craving is virtually identical to impulsive sexual desire.
Exactly the same pathways. The smokers were taught not to fight the wave, but to ride it. When the urge hits, set a timer for 10 to 20 minutes. Do not negotiate with yourself, don't bargain, don't reason, just stay in light motion.
What does light motion mean?
Take deep breaths, go for a walk, do the dishes. If you can just stay in motion for 20 minutes, the peak of the wave will pass, the dopamine spike will recede, and your clearer thinking will come back online.
But even if you successfully surf that 20-minute wave, you're still in danger if your surroundings are actively working against you.
Yes, step 3.
This brings us to the environmental traps we set for ourselves. You have to be smarter than your environment. Take a hypothetical guy from the behavioral case studies. Let's call him John.
Okay, go.
John feels like he has zero self-control. But if you analyze his evenings, he is building a trap for himself every single night.
He is setting up the perfect storm. He's alone. The room is dark. His phone is in bed with him. An Instagram notification pops up.
Right.
That is a highly precise Pavlovian sequence of environmental cues that reliably triggers a dopamine response and leads to a lapse.
So how does he bypass that conditioning?
You break the chain of cues before it completes. Keep the phone out of the bedroom entirely. Turn off the notifications. If late at night is your danger window, turn it into a movement window.
Change the environment.
Yeah. When you physically remove the environmental cues, you don't even have to tap into your depleted willpower, because the temptation never properly forms in the brain in the first place.
You are starving the virus of the environment it needs to execute its code. Now, assuming you've managed your environment, there's a deeper layer to this. Step 4. And I want to dig into this next piece because it requires identifying the real emotion driving the behavior.
This is crucial. Very often, what we interpret as a sudden, uncontrollable spike in lust is actually a disguise for something else entirely.
A disguise.
Consider a behavioral profile of a man named Bob. Bob was convinced he just had an unmanageably high sex drive. But when he actually started tracking when these intense urges occurred, a totally different pattern emerged.
The urges weren't random. They didn't appear when he was happy, engaged, or busy. They appeared precisely when he was overwhelmed with stress at work or when he was sitting at home feeling deeply isolated.
Lust and pornography consumption are very often poorly chosen coping mechanisms for boredom, stress, or loneliness. The brain is feeling a negative emotion, and it wants a quick, powerful hit of dopamine to numb it out.
Hold on, I have a hard time buying that at face value.
Okay.
I think a lot of people listening might be skeptical too. You're telling me an urge that feels purely, intensely physical, like a biological reproductive drive, is actually just stress from a bad day at the office. How does a psychological emotion disguise itself as a physical, biological drive?
It disguises itself because the brain is highly efficient at seeking relief. When you experience profound stress or isolation, your cortisol levels spike.
It's stress hormone.
Right. Your brain wants an anesthetic to bring those levels down.
Correct.
Over time, if you have repeatedly used sexual release or pornography to flood your brain with dopamine during stressful moments, your brain creates a neurological shortcut.
Ah, I see.
It learns, when I feel stressed, sexual stimulation is the fastest way to numb the pain. So it generates a powerful sexual urge, not because you are actually physically aroused, but because you are stressed and your brain wants its medicine.
Wow, that is a massive paradigm shift. When the urge surfaces, if you pause and ask yourself honestly, am I actually feeling desire right now, or am I just tired, overwhelmed, and feeling disconnected from people? You completely strip the urge of its power.
Exactly.
You realize you aren't fighting a monster of high sex drive. You are fighting a biological system desperately looking for a coping mechanism. Once you see that, you can address the real problem. You call a friend, you step away from the stressful work project, and suddenly the urge doesn't have a problem left to solve.
It dissolves. But, and this brings us to step 5, we also have to acknowledge the reality of neuroplasticity. Sometimes the hardware has been altered so deeply over such a long period that these behavioral steps aren't enough on their own. You need to know when the issue is clinical.
Right. If you've tried observing the thoughts, surfing the wave, changing your environment, and tracking your emotional triggers, but you are still caught in a cycle that is actively damaging your relationships, your career, or your mental health, well, this might be more than just a habit that needs tweaking.
The World Health Organization, in their 11th revision of the International Classification of Diseases, the ICD-11 formally recognized compulsive sexual behavior disorder.
That's a huge step for clinical recognition.
It is. It is a clinical condition where people are unable to control these repetitive urges, even when they are facing severe negative consequences. Much like Nero facing the loss of his entire empire, but unable to stop his destructive spiral.
If that description feels familiar to you, understand that there is zero shame in recognizing it. We live in an era where professional help is highly accessible. You can consult with clinical specialists anonymously online. Seeking professional help isn't a sign of weakness. It is the absolute clearest-headed decision your prefrontal cortex can make. It's bringing in professional tech support to reboot a deeply compromised operating system.
Looking back at the incredible journey we've taken today, the through line is clear. Unchecked lust is an ancient, powerful biological drive. It is a force strong enough to topple Roman emperors and insidious enough to physically shrink the gray matter in our modern brains.
Yeah, it severs the connection to our logical centers and traps us in a cycle where brute force willpower only makes the obsession stronger.
But unlike Nero, who had absolutely no idea what was happening inside his own head, you have a distinct advantage.
You have the tools of modern psychology and neuroscience. You don't have to be a victim to your own biology.
No, you don't.
You can observe the thought without judgment to redirect blood flow to your logical brain. You can surf the 20-minute wave of the urge knowing the dopamine spike will naturally crash. You can systematically redesign your environment so the Pavlovian triggers never reach you.
And most importantly, you can look under the hood and identify the true underlying emotions that are driving the behavior in the first place.
Connecting this to the bigger picture raises a truly fascinating question. We talk about how lust is so often a neurological shortcut, a coping mechanism for feeling lonely, stressed, or isolated.
The brain seeking an anesthetic for negative emotion.
Right. If modern science tells us that this drive is frequently a mask for feeling disconnected, what if our modern tech-fueled epidemic of lust isn't actually about an increase in sexual desire at all?
What do you mean?
What if it is really just a symptom of an unprecedented societal epidemic of loneliness? We are more digitally connected than any generation in human history, but psychologically we are profoundly more isolated.
That's incredibly insightful.
And if that's true, then maybe the ultimate cure for this isn't just managing our screen time or locking away our phones. Maybe the real cure is actively finding ways to truly, deeply connect with the people around us.
That is a profound thought to mull over. It's not just about fighting the dark, It's about actively building real connection in the light.
Exactly. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. You have the tools, you understand the science. Now it's time to take back control.